Hello.
Hey,
Hey, we
Hey.
can we can hear you, David, but we can't see you. What
Yeah.
happened?
Just a moment.
Take your
Camera.
time.
camera, it's
Right
fine, it's
here.
fine.
There we
Yeah,
go.
Bingo.
welcome.
Welcome.
Hey,
Thanks for
nice.
joining us.
Thanks for having me. Good
I
evening.
al- How are you?
I'm good. Good.
You're
You?
in Italy, right?
Yeah. I'm in the
So,
north.
yeah, so the pretty much hardest hit region in Italy, right? But they are starting to loosen the restrictions a little bit, or
Yeah, a little. They opened the postal service, which was a big plus.
that was
I-
close as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I couldn't go to the post. I had a ton of merchandise that I had sold, like I guess early March.
Yeah.
They closed the post offices. So on Monday, we brought a couple of bags worth down there. It's crazy. But they made me stand like behind a yellow tape, and they had plastic windows like a bank now,
Yeah.
one at a time. It was crazy.
Yeah, but I did because it was never closed here in Germany. So postal that kind of saved my life. I'm a father, so that means I have to get new stuff for my son to play when we're inside. So Amazon is still coming, so everything is that's it. It pretty much takes them longer than it used to, but it still helps quite a lot. Quite a bit to get some new games and stuff.
Yeah. Basically, his second career will be a toy shop after
Yeah.
Corona.
Exactly. Yeah.
I got plenty in the cantina. Give me a call. I've been trying to get I got my wife. She stays everything since the babies were newborn till now. I got a mountain of crap. So if you want it, give me a call. I've got ancient stuff.
That's cool. I love that. Not all the. I mean, there's so much. I mean, because my son stays inside, he watches all that TV and he watches ads, and it's always like the newest stuff, like Paw Patrol and blah 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 blah. So it's not the classic games that we used to play. It's just the next merchandise wave that's coming up.
I got the cool stuff. I got Mickey Mouse. I got Winnie the Pooh. I got it all, brother.
Cool.
I'm hooked up. I'm like a drug dealer. I've got it all. It's all stashed in my it'll be my hiding place when the war breaks out. So at least I'll have hand puppets to play with, right?
Don't shoot me. Yeah,
Wow.
but we're really. I mean, it's great that you're here. One of the true legends of metal. I gotta say that. When I was reading through that list, what you've done in your career, I was like, okay, where does this end now? And you might know that we spoke to Malte like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So and since he's also playing with and for you, it was just like, oh my God, this I know this connection, and there was so many connections that were coming up, and that was pretty impressive, I gotta say.
Yeah. My manager actually did a photo of all the CDs I've done in the last 15 years. It was scary. It's like 25 albums. I mean, kind of overkill.
So one of the first biggest things you did is with the band Accept.
Yeah.
Right. So when we started before that, what would you say? What brought you to metal, and what inspired you to do that? What were the bands you were looking up to when you started with music?
Oh, you mean when I was playing the clubs, or just starting listening to music?
Yeah, like all of this, like when you started playing in clubs. And
my first two albums I bought the same day were Alice Cooper's School's Out and Deep Purple Machine Head. And then have you seen the original Alice Cooper School's Out? It's a school desk, and you could open the top of it, and the album would slide out. And on the album was a paper woman's underwear wrapped around the album. And I'm told now that this thing is worth a fortune. I tore those off and put them on my wall, but God knows where they are. But I listened to those two albums.
Collectors will always. It's so incredible. What is the worth of some things? Where I'm like, dude, I had that like 20 years ago and I just threw it away because it was trash.
It meant nothing. It was like this thing that I had to slide back on the vinyl, and it was cool to look at because I was a young kid, a young boy. Oh, girls' underwear. And it had a little like silk bow on it. It was incredible the way they used to do albums. And from there, I mean, I think my favorite song was Public Enemy #9 from Alice. And then, of course, School's Out was all over the place. And then on Deep Purple was Pictures of Home. You know, I wasn't real big on Smoke on the Water, and I liked kind of the B-side stuff. And then I always sang in boys' choirs, of course, but where I came from, if you were in the choir, you got your ass kicked. It was kind of a sissy thing to do. So I had a music teacher kind of going before that. I mean, I hope I don't bore you with this story. But
no.
I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I heard the choir every day when I'd walk down the hall. And I went in and I just stood there and watched, and it really touched me because my grandmother used to sing to me as a boy, country music in the house. We played country music all day and night. And I kind of just introduced myself to the music teacher. Her name was Mrs. Harnick. And she said, I'd like to try you out. Can you sing? And I didn't know. So I sang Yesterday, Paul McCartney. And she stopped playing her guitar and looked at me. She said, you have pitch. You're in my choir if you want. But I was frightened because the boys in my school would beat you up. It was a girls thing, right? So in those days, I could sing really high. So I would sneak in after school and do my rehearsals, and then I would run home so the boys wouldn't chase me and beat the hell out of me. It was kind of a rough time. But my first performance was that song in front of the school with her on an accompaniment. But because in those days, it was not cool to be in a choir, after I finished that, I decided I'm not doing this anymore. This is crazy. I'm just going to buy albums and listen in my room. And by then I graduated to Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, and records like that. But I had left and not showed up for class, and she came to my mom's house and said, where's David? He has to use his talent. He's got a gift. And she came and got me, and I said, no, I can't do it. I was frightened. She said, you're wasting your time. And I said, no, man, I don't want any part of this. So I kind of regret that. I should have stuck with it because she really wanted me to stay with it. Now, I don't know where it would have gone from then, but she was really, now I look back at her and I'm very grateful for that one. But I got into Aerosmith, of course, you know, and Led Zeppelin was big in our country. I mean, it was kind of like, I remember being in an older guy's house and he had Led Zeppelin too, and he played it, and the magic of it, I couldn't believe the power, the sound of this band. And we would play it over and over again and watch the television with the volume off and smoke weed like idiots and just listen to Led Zeppelin, you know. And then I left my home when I was 15, you know, family problems, and I went on my own, and I moved in with a bunch of guys in an apartment. And there was one dude there who I've actually just found again on Facebook. It was really weird, about 2 weeks ago. His name was Scott, and he was a guitar player. And I was working in 2 factories making candles. And I would come home after a double shift, 16 hours a day, and he'd be laying on the couch with a Strat with all these girls hanging out, doing nothing and playing in clubs. And I hated the guy, you know, and I'd have these stinky clothes, you know, and I'd got in the shower and wash up, and all the girls would look at me like, oh, that's a normal guy. He's not cool.
Of course.
Well, one day I was singing in the shower. We used to have those AM radios that you could put in the shower with you with batteries.
Yeah.
Remember?
I remember those, yeah.
Oh, man, it was great. And I would sing in the shower. And one day I was singing Communication Breakdown by Zeppelin. And he opens up the curtain. I'm standing there in the water, and he looked at me and goes, dude, you can sing. Want to join my band? And I was about 16, I think, 17 at that time. And we played our first gig. We had 4 songs, and we played a beer party in the country. And we had these little clicking lights, you know, the yard lights. And I'd stolen them from my dad's house. He was on vacation. So I went out and stole like the green ones, the blue ones, the red ones. So we had a light show. So I screwed them to these boards on the side of this floor stage and had a guy going like this, click, 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 click. That was our light show. But it was amazing. That was
your first show, and you already had a light technician.
Yeah, he was cool. He did everything. He brought the beer. Yeah, he loaded the truck. He wanted to be part of the band. I mean, and I'm still talking to that guy. It's unbelievable. We're all kind of in touch because of Facebook, and we laugh about this stuff. It was so corny, but it was so real to us. You know, we would play high schools, you know, where you do the lunch hour. You know, you would go to the school and you would play because one of the guys in the band was still in school, and we'd go play in the lunch hour with all the kids eating on the floor, and they'd put a rope around us. We'd run 4 or 5 songs and a 1 hour lunch, and then we'd leave.
Was that heavy metal already, or was that rather...
I mean, we were doing like odd stuff. We were doing, in those days, we would do Rush. first Rush stuff. We would do stuff from the Gods, Angel, Kiss, of course, old Zeppelin stuff, and some Sabbath. You know, we would do the weird tracks, you know. Yeah. And of course the kids all knew it. You know, it was like everybody was really involved. So it was magic.
It sounds great.
When did you then start to do some music that's more metal, that it got a bit harder? What inspired you to go there?
I would say the live Judas Priest album knocked me out. Unleashed in the East, the Green Manalishi, Hellbent for Leather, all that stuff. I started jamming in bands that were doing the British invasion. And UFO. I went to see UFO in 1978, I think, on the Strangers in the Night tour. There was a radio station in my city, Minneapolis, called KDWB 63, and they had a 63-cent ticket night. And UFO and Rick Derringer, and I knew Rick Derringer, of course, who he was, because of Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo and those songs, but nobody knew who UFO was. And I was completely mesmerized with Michael Schenker, this blonde, beautiful guitar player with a white V and a black, like spandex bodysuit, standing under this white par light, creeped out, staring at the audience. And I remember standing there and I said, this is the greatest night of my life. And then that morning, the next day, I bought every album I could find of theirs, and I just flipped out on the British invasion. And I found, I think, Killers from Iron Maiden that day. The album cover I loved, so I bought it because of that. That was my kickoff into the British metal, you know, Saxon, you know, those bands. Yeah. And that's what we did. We covered all that stuff. And Accept. I mean, we did Restless and Wild. We did Fast as a Shark. I mean,
yeah.
So you covered them before you were the voice of Accept, for example.
You know, I really didn't take them seriously. I love the crunching riffs and like, you know, Fast as a Shark, the intro, and all the crazy stuff they did, you know, the Heidi Ho, whatever it was. And it came in blood red vinyl, actually. One of the first red vinyl records I'd ever seen, which we just stare at, you know, and go, look at this, it's red vinyl. But Udo fascinated me. I couldn't quite figure out this guy. I mean, this weird voice, and just, he was kind of like the German Rob Halford to me.
I don't think anyone still today, nobody has really figured him out. Yeah, I mean, he's just Udo.
Yeah. So that we covered all that stuff, and we'd play clubs. In those days, you played 6-7 nights a week. I'm sure you've heard this before. 4 sets a show, and we traveled, you know, 18-hour drives. We were on tour all of 3-4 straight years. I mean, it never stopped, and we'd learn all this stuff. And then when Screaming for Vengeance came out, of course, the British metal exploded in America. Blackout. We were doing actually older Scorpion songs too. I got to mention that. We were doing Self-Out Virgin Killers, and we did Pictured Life. We did a lot off the live album Tokyo Tapes. I mean, we were really, really well versed in what you guys were doing. We were keeping our eye on it because the German metal and the English metal was cooler than some of the American bands, you know.
Just one thing, because I'm not trying to interrupt you, but of course we have questions from the chat. One thing, the new CD is really good. That is something I heard from a lot of people, and I also read some reviews. And you mentioned you are in the north, right? Lombardy, right? In Italy. Where exactly are you there? Because we have some Italian fans in the chat. So
Piacenza.
Okay. So you should get that.
I live about an hour and 15, 20 minutes south of Milan.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Very nice.
Well, we already talked about Accept. Is there a special song you like? Because what we're doing here is also that we're listening to songs. And I think one of the Accept songs would be a nice way to start this.
Old song or one of my songs?
A song you like.
You can decide. I mean, you're the guest. You're the VIP doing that.
I want to do Losing More Than You've Ever Had off Balls to the Wall. I actually covered that song, and some of my fans were blown away that I even remembered that song. Let's do Losing More Than You've Ever Had off Balls to the Wall.
Why is it special? Why do you like that?
I have a great friend in Sweden who's an absolute Accept fanatic, and he's always trying to get me to play the B-side stuff, the stuff that people aren't that familiar with, only the real Accept fans. And we never played that song live, and the band never talked about it, but I always liked it. And then I talked with Andy Susemiel one day, and I said, you know that song? And he goes, yeah, of course I know that song. I said, let's play it live. And those Swedish guys happened to show up in Sweden at this gig, and we played it, and they went absolutely freaking crazy. So this is dedicated to them.
Yeah, so as soon as we come back, we have to talk about how you met the Accept guys and all that
absolutely.
stuff.
Yeah, that's why I'm here.
I'm going to play the song right now. And we are back. And you guys are having like a little hype train fight there in chat. That is pretty great. I see some icons from the last hype train. Awesome. But before we start, this is
just something on Twitch, so you can do.
Yeah, it's people donating. Yeah, if a lot of people start donating, we get a hype train, and cool. They get special awards for that as well. But because it's all in my ear at the moment, because I have like the central screen where everything so it's popping up in my ears all the time. But there was a question. Of course, because that's pretty easy to answer for you, I guess, because I heard a dog barking in the background. Is that right? Because there was a question if you are a cat or a dog person.
I'm a dog man. I actually my hobby is I train pointing dogs, hunting dogs. It's
whoa, nice.
I've done since I was a very young man, and I've raised multiple champions. Upland bird hunting is one of my passions, and a sport that I love. I keep an English setter here at home. Yeah. He's not much of a hunting dog. He's more of a lover and part of the family.
That's awesome, though.
We're all dog people now here. So.
Cool. Okay. So there's one more serious question, and I have a fly here. That's like the only indication that it's really summer. Because I can't go out, so how would I know? But it's a fly in here. So
I got one today too. So it was like my first signal that there is actually life outside.
There's one serious question which is making us jumping around a little in the timeline. I prepared this so well to go up.
Yeah, you did. Oh, I saw that. Yeah, it was perfectly prepared.
This. It's about the Circle of Silence CD. So someone is really interested in how, in retrospective, you're thinking about this CD and where you think about it.
That's interesting that that's brought up. I just had that re-released on vinyl with Rox Records, both those albums, and it's coming out on an English label, my whole retrospective of my life, which you mentioned earlier, and there'll be the double CD, both those albums. How that happened was the band Bangalore Choir, which is the band I formed right after Accept fired me. I went to Los Angeles with real momentum. I mean, everybody knew me, of course, and I went out there with the goal of I'm going to do this. And I played 9 shows in Los Angeles when I put the band together, and I had an offer. Now, 9 shows in LA is about a year or 9 months. You know, you don't play all the time. You play the Strip, you know, Orange County, and every label in the city offered me a deal. So I went with Warner Brothers Giant. Of course, 3 months after that album came out, we were killing it. We were doing pretty good sized shows. I had Howard Kaufman managing me, who handled Whitesnake, you know, Don Henley, Stevie Nicks. Actually, I did all my demos at Stevie Nicks' house. Her personal manager, Glenn Parrish, was my manager, another personal manager. So I was pretty well hooked up. But a little silly band from Seattle kind of crushed our dreams. And literally within 3 to 4 months after that album came out, it was over. I was up here on top. And then like so many others, I mean, I remember sitting at the table with Janie Lane and Stephen Piercy and all the guys that we ran around with in LA, and we're all looking at each other going, what are you going to do? We couldn't get arrested. We were like the Antichrist. You know, we were the dirt heads, they called us, the big haired guys, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, like so many others, we said, well, we got to follow the trend. And the first Circle of Silence album kind of came out of me going to jam with Badlands when Ray Gillan had gone back to New Jersey. I knew Greg Chase on because Bangalore had done some shows with Badlands, and they liked my voice. And I knew Jake, sort of. I don't think anybody really knows Jakey Lee. He's a mysterious character, but great guitar player. And I went down to rehearse with Badlands, and Jake showed up typically in fashion 3 or 4 hours late and just kind of sat on a guitar rig and looked at me through his hair, and we ran through the set. Did that a couple of days, and then Jake said, I'm not sure I want to do this anymore. He was kind of lost after Ray left. And Greg and I stayed in touch, the bassist, and we formed Circle of Silence. And we picked up a guitar player named Larry Farkas out of Orange County, Torrance. And we had Ray Luzier on drums, who, of course, went on to David Lee Roth, and now he's in Korn. And basically, we recorded that whole, our whole goal was to go back to kind of the Sabbath thing, because, you know, Soundgarden was really, went back to that. And I loved Chris Cornell, what he was doing. And we kind of wanted to do that in a live recording setting rather than 800 tracks of, you know, $10,000 a day recording, and because things changed literally overnight. So less was more at that time. I was working with Steve Plunkett from Autograph. We had written a bunch of songs together, actually, and known each other. He contributed a bit, and we recorded that album during the Northridge earthquake in Los Angeles. So about every 30 minutes, we'd have an aftershock and have to stop recording. We did the whole album live in 4 days. 4 days. Wow. I was in a bathroom looking out a little round window singing, and the band was playing. We were well rehearsed. We knew the songs, really organic. And it's really strange because that album didn't really do anything when it came out, because a lot of us so-called hair guys, nobody listened to us trying to be heavy. But over the years, that album is kind of, I see it at a lot of my shows. Will you sign this for me? I really love it. And then we did another one called Suicide Candyman, which is kind of the least favorite of my two, but there are a couple good tracks on it. And we did that pretty much live as well. And then it just kind of fell apart. I got really discouraged. And this was about 94, and I left Los Angeles. I mean, I just quit doing rock and roll. I was destroyed. But of course, this is all after Accept.
Yeah. Well, the guy who asked this question, he was also a bit, he loved metal. And then in the 90s, grunge came, and he was like devastated that his music just died. So that's why he's so happy that you're here. And that's why he's asking this question.
Hey, thank you. I have to say, Bangalore Choir, the funny thing about that was I was called into the office, the big corporate Warner Brothers thing, and I'm sitting with Kenny Austin, who's Mo Austin's son. We all know who Mo Austin is or was, and they said, it's over, get a day job, rock and roll is dead. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I mean, we got the most added radio, we're, you know, the video's kicking ass, we're, you know, we're doing this, we're doing these shows, we've done some gigs with Lynch Mob and those guys, we had the same management, of course, and we've done a bunch of things, and they basically said, no, it's over. But what had happened was, in 2010, I was asked to do a reunion in England for Firefest. And when I got there, I got 2 other original members from that band, and we played a storming set. We actually did a live album that night. And we hadn't seen each other for 19 years. Can you imagine that? We rehearsed in the hotel room with boxes for drums and practice.
Oh my God. It usually takes forever. I mean, yeah. nowadays people rehearse for like half a year. Like Metallica does half a year.
We got shit-faced, drunk, and ran through the set a few times. We had a hotel room full of people. And usually those shows, there's about 1,200 people at each one. It was really a great festival. I'm really sad that it's no longer around. But I was told by everybody that was there, where have you been? This album was huge in Europe and in Asia. And if I would have known that, I would have not done Circle of Silence. I would have got on an airplane and gone back to being a gypsy, crashed on people's couches, and played the clubs in Europe. But I was told it was dead. And it wasn't true, because it seemed that Europe kind of was later to pick up the grunge following.
Yeah.
And I had a career, but I was told it was over. So what do? You listen to you always make that mistake listening to the guys who think they know everything in the music business, which they don't know a fucking thing about the business anymore. And I don't think they ever did. But yeah, that was really disappointing. But it was unbelievable. The first song, everybody's singing along with me, and they knew the album. We played that album, the On Target album. And yeah, So where do we go from here? You want to talk about Accept, you said? Or?
Yeah.
Wherever it leads, I don't care. Those stories are great and they're very insightful.
I have to kind of go back a little bit. I went to LA a few times. I was in a club band called Dare Force in the Midwest, and that was a very, if you've seen the video I did for Cacophony of Souls, it's called Another Life, Another Time. It's my brother and I. My brother Bob did the video. It's me and him as little kids, some 8mm film when we were fishing, and a big show we did with that band Dare Force. And we toured incessantly. I mean, it was madness. We opened for a lot of big acts. We were kind of the go-to band in those days. Well, I said, hey guys, we're a big fish in a small pond in Minneapolis. And they were convinced that because Prince had come out of Minneapolis, we were going to get noticed. Nobody cared. So let's go to LA. Nobody wanted to go. So I left. And I was homeless. And I mean, I was sleeping in cars, you know, meeting people in Hollywood on the Strip and hanging out with them for a few days. I'd find, I mean, this isn't a pity story, but it was, a lot of us were doing the same thing. I would find a car that didn't have an alarm. I'd pull the door. And if it didn't go off, I'd crawl in the backseat of the car and sleep the night. And then I'd usually get woken up by some.
Oh, so you didn't sleep in your own car?
No, I didn't have a car.
Okay.
So well, I had a backpack. Yeah, I had a backpack and I was huffing around trying to get famous like everybody else in LA. You know, either you work in a restaurant if you're an actor or you are in a band, you know. I mean, everybody's trying to get looked at. Everybody's looked at you there. Like, it's like a big science lab of so-called talent. Anyways, it didn't really work out. So while I was there, I had met Mitch Perry. Of course, you know, he worked with Schenker and he worked with Billy Sheehan in the old days in a band called Talus. And Mitch and I hooked up and we did some demos. And really bizarre chain of events. I'd been out in LA kicking around and I was staying at a woman, her name was Lucy Forbes. She had this thing called Rock Congress. And she had this vision of like a rock and roll placement agency. Yeah. And she would gather up all these, you know, dirtbags like me that were homeless, had nowhere to go. And she'd kind of sort through us, the ones that had talent and didn't. And I was sleeping on her floor in Santa Monica. And I had recorded those demos with Mitch and had another one of those I'm done with music things. And I just left. And I'd gone to Colorado, but left all my demos at Lucy's. Now, Lucy was seeing Dieter Dierks, the producer of Scorpions and Accept. And Dieter had some business meetings in Los Angeles and happened to come there a few days after I left. And he said, I'm in a real bind here. I've got this English guy that they're kind of looking at in Accept, but it's not working out. His name was Robert Armitage. And she goes, you know, I've got this singer, David Reece. I got a cassette. And she put it in and he heard the first song and he said, that's the guy. Where is he? And she said, you know, I don't know. I don't know. He just left.
that was after you said, okay, I'm done with music, right?
Yeah.
You just left.
Colorado, and I'd actually gotten a job. A few days later, my parents had moved to Colorado. So I rented a little cabin in the mountains and went to work. And probably 2 weeks into that, it was wintertime, February, snowing always. And the phone rang and I picked it up. Hello, this is Wolf Hoffman from Accept. May I speak with David Reece? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fucking Mickey Mouse. And I think I hung up. I didn't know. I thought it was a joke. And so I hung up the phung.
Like a friend doing a Schwarzenegger impression or something.
Exactly, like a Schwarzenegger imitation. And I hung up the phone, I think, and then he called right back and he said, I'm sorry, we've got a bad connection. This is Wolf Hoffman from the group Accept. Do you know who I am? And I'm like, of course. What do you want? He goes, well, I have this demo tape that Dieter Dierks got. And I'm like, what demo tape? And he goes, well, he got it from Lucy. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the Mitch Perry stuff. We really like the sound of your voice. Would you be interested in an audition? And I'm like, this is not happening. What? And I said, sure. So I actually called my father and I said, I just got this call. And he's like, what are you talking about? I said, this band Accept in Germany wants to fly me over and audition me. And they want me to be there in 2 days. And he said, we have a terrible storm coming and they're going to close the highway.
Of course.
Right, exactly. This is how chaotic and the music business is. We have to leave now. So I'm in a small town called Woodland Park. It's about 2.5 hours to Denver He flies over to my house. I pack up, an overnight bag. We get in the truck and we're blazing the trail, and it's snowing into Denver. He dumps me off at a hotel close to Stapleton Airport, and they had already booked my flight, and I had to hang around Denver for a day, I think, and then get up really early to fly to Germany. And that's how the story began. I got on a plane to Dusseldorf. I'd never flown anywhere outside of America, and I had to rush and get a passport. I remember that in those 2 or 3 days. It was madness. Anyways, I ended up in Dusseldorf, and when I got off the plane, there was Peter Baltus and Wolf Hoffman standing there waving at me, and I thought, wow, those are the guys in Accept. That's the band I used to cover. That's them.
Yeah.
And the crazy part about it was, I remember, I was so excited. And in those days in Lufthansa, you could drink for free all night on the plane. So
I remember that. Not only Lufthansa, also Swiss Air and stuff. Yeah.
I drank probably 2 bottles of Jack Daniels. I couldn't sleep. And then I get to Germany, and then it starts hitting you. You get off the plane, and I'm in the car, and I'm just talking my head up, and they're looking at each other like, who is this lunatic? And they take me to this guest house in Pulheim. And it's like old rundown house, not terrible, with a key. Bring me in, show me a bedroom, and they say, we'll see you tomorrow. And I'm like, okay. And they left. So I'm sitting in this big house by myself, and it's cold and raining in February, right? And I can't sleep, and it's like I'm freaking out, nervous, and I decide, okay, I'll go jogging. I'll just go out and go for a walk. Well, Weg and way and all that. I don't know what the streets mean in German. So I take off, and I don't really think first, where am I? I just take off. And I got lost. And it's like 5 a.m, right? And I'm running around this village in utter panic. And I happen to look down the street, and I see this house, and I go, that looks like the house. Put the key in the door, the Schlüssel, and it opened the door. I go in, and I'm totally exhausted. I fell in the bed, and about an hour later, bam, 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 on the door. I open the door, and it's Peter carrying a bass on his back and a bag, saying, let's go. I go where? To the studio. I'm like, great, I get to meet the Scorpions. I was such a green, I don't know what the word gullible, because I knew they were doing Savage Amusement. So my whole fantasy was, I get to meet the Scorpions. This is the coolest thing. I'm going to meet Dieter Dierks. And we walk in the studio, and there's Dierks and Rudolf Schenker talking. And I said, hey, man, I'm like, whoa. And they just kind of looked at me like, who are you? What? And I'm like, and Peter goes, follow me. And he took me to a basement studio with a 24-track machine. And he said, and a microphone. And he turned everything on, and he played me the song, Turn the Wheel Around. And it had the chorus that he had written. And he said, sing something. And I'm like, what? He goes, come on, let's start working. And I'm like, are you joking? He goes, no, let's just work through this. And I'm like, okay. So this went on for weeks. And every time I'd do a song, the rest of the band would come in at night, of course, and listen and say, oh, I like this, I don't like that. But that's how it began. And that's when I learned about the German ethic, the work ethic. I mean, I thought I was a working
6 in the morning.
Well, it's 10 o'clock probably when we start, and we quit at 10 at night. And I thought I was a hardworking rock and roll singer, but I didn't really know what it was like to be in the big leagues and be in a real touring, serious band. And I had really no idea how big Accept was, to be honest. I mean, I knew they were well known, but I got a quick ass kicking, and this is what it's all about. And that's how it began. Crazy.
How much German did you learn while you were here?
Very little, until I got involved with a German woman who refused to speak
This
English.
is how you learn a language. You find yourself a lover.
She spoke 4 languages fluently and would not speak English to me in the house. I moved out of the guest house and moved in with her, and she would only speak German to me. And I got pretty good. And interesting, the things you learn when you're sitting at a dinner table when people are speaking another language and they're speaking about you. And you go, bit of us? And they go, what? And I remember, it was a very tense time. They didn't really know what they were doing, if they'd made the right choice. And I understand that. Udo was next door doing, I think, Mean Machine. That's where I met Andy Susamil. I've known him for, God, 32 years. And I remember they were kind of laughing about the American guy and joking. And she was saying, you know, they're not really speaking that nicely about you. And she goes, I want to teach you something. Ich habe keine Angst für dir.
That's a good one.
And she said, I'm going to give you a signal at the dinner table, and I want you to say that. And I was like, okay. So I practiced. Ich habe keine Angst für dir. Ich habe keine. I did it for 100,000 times. And she looked at me and winked, and I went, Ich habe keine Angst für dir. And it was like utter silence. They were all like, and they looked at each other like, that's kind of a difficult thing to say for an American, right? So I wonder how long he's been speaking German. So that kind of opened it up where they would speak to me in English when we were together. But that was a funny moment.
Yeah, but just because your story, so you got dragged out of bed, you had to start singing in that basement studio, right? And yeah. How was the first live show with Accept? I mean, did the fans accept you right away? Because Accept really big in Germany, so
we went to a place called the Empire Club to rehearse the show.
Okay.
And basically rehearse, not really even a planned show. The place had a workout center and it had a bar in there with a stage. And they had made an arrangement that we were going to rehearse the show, the set. We kept going through new songs, old songs. And one day they came up to me and said, oh, we're going to play on this day in March. And I'm like, play what? We're going to play a show. And I'm like, what? And they're like, this is your final audition. And if that doesn't scare the shit out of you, I don't know what does. Because I was convinced I was going to go home the day after the show. And while we were preparing for the gig, we were across the street, and they had advertised it as Germany's, I think, second largest metal band. And everybody knew that Accept had a new singer, and they knew it was us. And as I'm sitting in this restaurant looking out the window, there's about 1,000 people standing outside waiting to get in. And that's when you start to shit your pants. You know, it's a now or never. I've got to deliver. So we went on stage. I did the show. It was like a major blur to me. I remember people stage diving and going insane. And I thought I sucked. Well, the next morning I woke up, I heard the band talking in the guest house. I was at the guest house that morning and we partied all night. And then I thought, well, here it comes. I better go upstairs and get fired. And I went upstairs, and Gabby Hoffman reached her hand out and said, welcome to Accept. You got the gig. And that's how it happened. But it was about a 6-week audition in the basement recording with Peter. And then the final audition was a live gig. And I'm assuming it went pretty well because the place
Baptist by fire.
Yeah, absolutely. They did not. It was such a big choice and decision to change that they wanted to be absolutely sure. You know,
I mean, yeah, because Accept was not a new band just starting out and auditioning a singer. It was, we are established and we need someone who's who can do the job and be satisfy the fans as well. Because when you've played that much as a band, of course you have fans that might be not very welcoming.
There are people out there that still hate me. I mean, but what they need to realize, I didn't hire myself and Accept hired me. So that's one thing that some of the diehard Accept fans don't realize. You know, I didn't hire myself. I was chosen out of lots of people to do that gig. And I always try to remind the people that have the bad hater talk that, you know, come on guys, it was a challenging time, but I didn't force myself into that group. I wanted the job. But if you listen to Eat the Heat, if you go back to Russian Roulette and Metal Heart, you start hearing songs like Screaming for a Love Bite. They were starting to move into a more commercial direction. And the record company was saying, okay, Balls did 400,000 in the States. You know, we got to crack gold. This thing is on the verge of breaking, but it never really does. So let's get an American guy or an English guy to, you know, bring it across the pond and really open this thing up. Because this band has all, like you said, the history. And it failed. It didn't work.
Yeah. Well, then, as I read it, after that, you went on. There was you had a solo album, and you did a couple of things. So, what makes you keep going, kind of? So do you still listen, to what kind of bands do you listen that influence you in a way that you say, okay, I want to do a new album, and this is what inspires me to do that? Because music is a living artifact. This is something that comes alive if there are new influences coming in. What are your influences over the time?
Right now?
Well, yeah, for example.
I'm really into Shinedown.
Oh.
I'm listening to, I love Sabaton's last album. I'm a diehard Priest fan. I think Priest's Firepower album was kind of a reawakening for me, because it kind of had even the image of Screaming for a Vengeance on it, and you know, the artwork, everything kind of reminded me of that time and period. So when I did the UDO tour last year, the Steel Factory tour, I played that album constantly, and I played the new Sabaton a lot. I was turned on to Shinedown by my wife. I like a lot of that stuff. I mean, I'm not really good at naming some of the new metal bands, but you know, after the Circle of Silence thing, I stopped music for 9 years. 9 years. Yeah. And I didn't have a computer. I was living on a ranch in Montana. I didn't know how to turn one on, and I didn't know what MySpace was or any of that stuff, because you know, I didn't tell anybody in the cowboy life, because I'd left rock and roll. I missed it terribly, but I had trained a dog for a guy, and he said, I'll trade you one of my computers for that dog. I'm an IT specialist. And I'm like, what's that mean? So he brought me this big, bulky television kind of thing, and he set it up. And we had dial-up in this village that I lived in. So it took an hour for MySpace, and he got me a page. And as soon as I set it up, I just got slammed with, where the hell have you been? And bands were offering me jobs like the first day.
So it's not only that you missed rock and roll, but rock and roll.
I don't know if that would be arrogant to say, but I maybe. I mean, it was nice to know, but I didn't know anything about illegal downloading or anything like that. I was really, really naive to what had happened, because I really walked away, but I had this empty hole in my heart. She said it's like an artifact, and that's true. What keeps me going? You know, when you do an album, you know if it's good. And if you always have that like second or third song that you're dreading to go in and sing, it sounds that way. So I can honestly say, in the last few albums I've done, Resilient Heart and this new album, that I was super excited to perform in front of the mic. I was like a little kid again. I felt rejuvenated. Like, I don't know if it's because I decided, you know, doing projects, the problem with doing projects is you become kind of like a hired gun guy. People go, oh, what band is he in this week? And there's a lot of singers doing that. And then one of the reasons we do it is to stay relevant, stay active. Yeah. But if you're in another person's band, you're their singer. Yeah. So you kind of don't really have, you put your identity on it in a sense, but you kind of have to stay in that box, right? When I was in Accept, I had to do the Udo stuff as close to it as I could, and I did pretty good at it. But being solo, I'm able to kind of just be me. And that was one thing Dieter Dirk said to me, and I've said this probably a million times. When we were working on my voice, we were doing the actual album, he stopped the recording and he said a couple of things that I want everybody to know. First thing he said was, you're a really good singer, but you don't know who you are as a singer, and it's my job to find out. Yeah. And he did. He really gave me that, I don't know if the word is confidence or just the label, what I am, you know, what my voice is capable of, where the good parts are, the bad parts, what to use, what to emphasize, how to phrase, because I was clueless. And then he said another thing that was really hit me hard. He stopped the tape one night and he turned his chair around and he looked at me and said, you realize if this album fails, it's your fault and my fault. They always blame the new singer and the producer. And those words could have not been more true in my life. That was one of those, I took offense to it, actually. I was angry. And he goes, I go, come on, I'm great. Everybody's going to love me. And he goes, this is a full contact sport, brother. This is rock and roll. Okay. This is MMA cage fighting. Trust me. They're out there and they'll eat your brains out. You know, trust me. And he was right. That's kept me going. I mean, I don't like to to give up. I'm not somebody that's going to lay down and let the haters push me around and conform to what they want. So that's where the freedom is now. But I always had that drive. I've been a driven person since I was born. I'm not a quitter.
Yeah.
And if you're writing songs, if you just write for an album, okay, I'm going to write a new album. That's not what it is. For me anyways, I'm writing all the time. And it's a constant artistic development thing.
Yes.
Like if you notice on these albums, I'm singing some lower stuff. And I'm a big David Bowie fan in a lot of ways. I like guys like Tom Petty. I like guys who aren't doing vocal gymnastics from the first note, because it seems like a lot of metal singers have to show the public, wow, look at my range. You're a man, sing like a man. A woman can scream like that. Look at the girl in Arch Enemy. She blows my mind. Okay, I'll be honest. I mean, I watched her one night on stage and I was like, wow, the power, but the delivery. For a man, you don't have to go out and go, ah, like Halford, in the old days. I mean, sing. I think people relate to that. I think they know, they feel it. And maybe that's an identity thing. I don't know.
I really would like to talk about your new album and how you do the songwriting right now. But before that, there's one little story maybe you can shortly tell us about it, because there was a song with your band Bangalore Tour, and the song is called Loaded Gun. And as I heard, like the main actor in this song is someone who wasn't famous when he was playing there, but became really famous right now. I'm talking, and I really wanted to listen to that video, and I want to see that video, of course, because we're talking about Jared Leto.
Yes,
so
we are.
How did that happen?
It's called a cattle call. You call up actors for the part, and you go through about 100 people. And this beautiful young man walked in with blue eyes and kind of had the James Dean hair and the flannel shirt with his mother. And everybody looked at him and said, that guy. And I later came to find out, I didn't even recognize him in some of the movies that he was in, but I found out from a girl that I knew that he was the singer of 30 Seconds to Mars. And I went to see him and, remember me? And of course, no. And then I reminded him and he said, dude, that was one of my first acting jobs. And I'm like, yeah. Because this girl I knew, she goes, do you realize who that guy is? And I'm like, no, who is he? That's Jared Leto. So yeah, that's the guy, Loaded Gun.
So I would really like to, I would say listen, but actually I would like to watch this video.
Yeah, funny thing is, while you were still talking, I was obviously searching in the background for the original video, and just from the thumbnail, I know that I've seen that video. Video. I mean, on MTV, when MTV was still doing
it was an expensive
music
production, right? It was expensive to do that.
Yeah, it was about $100,000. I mean, that song was written by one of the guys who's in Styx right now. It was brought to me and I hated it. I'm like, that's wimpy pop rock. I'm not doing it. Because we had Freight Train rolling, we had All or Nothing, we had Angel in Black, and I'm like, I'm not doing it. And Denny Rosenkrantz, who is like the guru of artist relations and radio, said, if you sing this song like David Reece, you've got a hit. When they released that song, it was the most added to radio in, like, I wouldn't say history, but it really took off. And Radio Day in America is on a Tuesday. And we had 112 ads nationwide. And Denny called me in the office, he said, buddy, you got a hit on your hands. Well, of course, 3 months later, I'm looking for a job, but it took off, and he was right. He called that song. He said, if you put David Reece on that, I think we got a single, because that's their job. That's one thing he did do really well.
Yeah.
But
well,
it was, yeah.